Hello, my front-end friends, and welcome to my podcast, General Musings. My name is Kevin, and this podcast is somewhere where I talk about whatever is front of mind for me in any given week, usually in some way that's related to front-end development. And this week's topic, which is not to overthink things, was inspired by one of the few newsletters that I haven't unsubscribed to yet, which is Jason and Caroline Zook's. I'm going to say their name wrong. I apologize. It's one of those things you read all the time, but then you never actually say it out loud. Jason and Caroline Zooks, I think that was right. Anyway, the name of their newsletter is called Growing Steady. And it's more of a business related newsletter, so it might not be something you're interested in, but it's refreshingly like the opposite of those marketing and grow your business type things. It's much more of like being human about it instead of some growth hacking businessy thing that you usually see about like SaaSes and all of that stuff. And the message that they had this week was not to overthink things. And it really resonated with me, especially the more I read it. It was Caroline that wrote that part of the newsletter. And she was talking about how she made her first online course just using her computer's webcam. And it made me think a little bit about how I started my YouTube channel. Because if you go back and you watch those early things, they're definitely a lot less polished from sort of the technical perspective of things. I had a mic, actually, the very early ones I wasn't even on screen, and I probably should have left it that way until I had a better setup, because once I was on screen, that side of things wasn't the best. But just, as the content I think was decent anyway, though, and over the years more and people started actually watching my content, and then I slowly tried to up my game in terms of the presentation of it all. Though I recently was watching back really early material of mine, and some of it I'm like, hey, I did a pretty good job there of how I'm teaching it, at the very least. So I guess the content itself is what mattered the most, right? And I think it's really important thing to remember when you're starting stuff off. And that's not just for content creation. This is about basically anything, but it's not to worry about the polish. It's to worry about getting things done. Even for me now, when I look at my own videos, I like my background now. I have good lighting, or better lighting. I'm probably way too shiny and stuff. I think that like overall, that side of things is looking decent. But then I look at a lot of the new creators that are coming along that have After Effects stuff going on, these animations, like the polish is top level, but the polish only matters if the content itself is good. So don't worry about the polish. Just worry about creating stuff or doing stuff. This could be for a website too. If you're trying to create a website, don't worry too much about the polish of that website at the very beginning. Another, I guess, to put it in that perspective instead of a content creation perspective, is I'm working on putting together my own course platform right now. And for things like that where the user's interacting with it, some level of polish I think is important, because you want a decent user experience. But if I'm making a course platform, the most important parts of the platform are the functionality of being able to log in and for the student to get through the lessons. Like that's the important part. And of course the content of the courses too, right? You need the good quality course content in there on top of all of that. And even when it comes to like that, the extra polish you can put into these things, I think having a certain level of like humanness to it all, where maybe it's missing some polish, I think is going to become something that's more important as time goes on as well. Maybe more with content creation than websites necessarily, but like as AI is continuing to just be able to generate mass amounts of content, having genuine stuff like an unedited podcast like this one is something that I think will resonate more with people. But even in terms of like the website itself or the course platform I'm talking about, where having a workable user experience with really high quality content, I think is what's really important. And just having no roadblocks. Like the polish in the MVP of putting this together, this platform together, for me is making sure it works, right? And that there's no, as the user's using it, there's nothing that's frustrating for them or getting in their way. It's something that just works and they're happy with that. And then I can add polish later. Like I was working on a few things that are like these like animations and like cool things on, because when you have like modules that have tons of lessons, I wanted to have a screen that had all the modules and you could get to individual lessons. And the first thing I built was just this over engineered thing where you could like expand it out and it would sort of cover up, and the usability of it was terrible. It was super fun to build. I enjoyed doing it and it looked fun one off. Like if you were playing with it, it could be fun to do it. But then to actually access the lessons, it sucked. And so like I added a whole bunch of polish without actually making it good, which when I realized like actually in using it after that, I'm like, this is trash. So I just dumped it in the garbage. I found a much simpler way of approaching the same thing. And I think things like micro animations and other things that can help the user understand what's happening can be really good. But those are like those small things you sort of add into on top of just it being easy to use in the first place, right? And so yeah, I think that's just one of those that idea of don't worry about the polish, I think is important no matter what we're doing, because it's so easy to not publish something because you're working on a product, or maybe you've been told that you should start a blog and you're not starting it just because you're worried it's not perfect, or you've written some blog posts and you won't publish them because you're worried that they're not perfect. You keep editing them over and over and over again. And I'm the biggest advocate for telling people to learn in public, either through video, which I know is a bit more of a production, so don't do video, do blog posts, whatever it is, anything at all. Just on social media, Blue Sky, Twitter, whatever it is you're on, Mastodon, just like little 250 character little like, this is what I learned today, anything like that, I think is really beneficial for you. Like, do it in a selfish way, right? And don't worry about it being perfect, because other people might see it and they're just going to find it useful, and they're not going to notice the things that are wrong with things. And yeah, I think that getting stuck on like, or even on that, like you'll be like, oh, I want to make a blog, but instead of even worrying about the content of the blog, you're more focused on making the perfect site to host that content that doesn't even exist yet, when like the content is what's the important part. And so just like make a GitHub repo, put a whole bunch of markdown files in there, and don't even worry about the site. Just share the markdown. Like every time you make a new markdown file that has like, today I learned that this new CSS feature, and just a little description of what it is. And I've talked about it before, so I don't want to go too deep into that idea, but it just, you learn so much even just by writing down how something worked. Like I did this, and a little description of what the thing is. It's the best way to learn anything, is explaining the things that you're learning. So a GitHub repo with a bunch of markdown files. And then if you eventually see, oh, I have some extra time on my hands now, I have all these markdown files, they're in a repo, I could just build something that, use a static site generator to turn those into actual content eventually, just so the presentations actually improve now instead of just reading them all on GitHub. But they're just as accessible either way. The content there is the important thing, with zero polish, basically, right? So just going and making stuff. And again, I'm doing this from a content creation perspective a lot, so I'm trying to turn it around into other ways as well. But this could be if you're working on a product that you are, a SaaS or something that you want to make public, just make the thing and don't worry about all the little details and all the other things. Those can come later once you have the ball rolling, but you need to get that ball rolling in the very first place at all. And yeah, nice short one this week. That's it. And yeah, I guess that's it for this week. And a shorter one than last time when I was just really rambling on for quite a while. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you very much for listening. And until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.